bring some self-compassion into this process because so often what we heard was we were too much, too emotional, too sensitive, to sort of reframe that like, yeah, I have lots of big emotions and I do feel things very deeply. And that's a good thing because we need that.
Welcome to Sensitive Stories. This episode is for educational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for treatment with a mental health or medical professional. Let's dive in.
Liz, can you start off by telling me your HSP discovery story, how and when you realized that you're highly sensitive?
Yeah, it's funny. I think it had a lot to do with getting to know you. I don't think I really knew anything or much about being highly sensitive. I always knew that I felt big. I always knew that I was very, very empathic and uh, uh, almost not to a fault, but like so empathic about animals and nature
Mm-hmm.
that like I always knew that was a part of me, but I didn't really ever have any way to sort of package it until you and I started talking. I started following some of your stuff early on in my business journey. So I think probably in my 50s, learning, which is,
Mm-hmm.
I think, late in life for a lot of people these days. Yeah.
It's amazing. I've heard that from other folks too, where we had this sense that, okay, I'm more emotional, more empathic, more, a deeply feeling person, but just not understanding the context for why that's happening.
Absolutely. To me, it was just like, I'm an introvert, right? Like that's what it all sort of lumped into like, I'm an introvert and I'm anxious. And so that's why I am the way I am
Mm-hmm.
versus like I have anxiety. And yes, I am introverted, but I also have this whole other piece that interacts with both those things.
Yes, that's exactly what I thought too. I was like, okay, I'm introverted, but then I hit a wall there, like, well, this doesn't quite explain everything.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like some things were missing. So when you
Yeah.
had that framework, did that shift anything for you, knowing, oh, there's something to this?
Yeah. Well, it was so almost like such a validation for all those other pieces. I think I used to sort of frame that overwhelmed feeling as like anxiety versus like I'm just getting overwhelmed. Like just can't take in more information. Um, but it also really helped me um, just see myself more compassionately, just to really be to embrace the sensitivity in a kinder, more compassionate way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
to kind of tease apart that feeling of anxiety, because
Yeah.
overwhelm anxiety, it gets jumbled, it feels the same, but when we pull it apart, there's different layers there, different causes. Um,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
curious for you as an HSP, what gets you to that point of overwhelm the most common?
Mm. I think, like, for me, it's, well, probably for a lot of HSPs, but like too much information, too much sensory information coming at me at once. And so it could be I'm with someone who is super extroverted, talks a lot, they talk loud, they're very boisterous. Like it takes me, I have to be careful because I tend to get irritable and just kind of, it just feels like there's too much coming at me. And it's not usually about the person themselves. It's just their energy is so different. Um, but it could be too, like I've been in trainings where you can tell the trainer wants to pack in as much information as possible for the good of the participants. And I just shut down. Like my
Mhm.
processing, I get to, well, there was a time where I would get teary, I'd get upset, I'd be like, what's wrong with me that I'm not understanding this or I'm not keeping up, but I'm better at identifying like, oh, this training just isn't for me. Like I can't take information in this way.
Mhm.
So that's been really helpful to know, but also crowds, like going to the mall, things like that.
Mhm.
Not very, I get that just wears me out. Yeah.
Yeah, whenever anything is too loud, too fast, it's so hard to integrate when we need to process it deeply. And
Yeah.
when we take in the nuance, it's a lot on our nervous systems.
Yeah. Yeah. It
Hmm.
really is. It really is. And it's nice, for me, it's nice to be able to recognize like it's not anything wrong with me. It's just the way I'm built.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. It's just this is how we're wired,
Yep.
and it's okay.
Yeah.
I'm curious how, so we're holding that. This is how we're wired, but then we also have to go to training sometimes or be in social situations sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, how do we accept that we're gonna do less? We're gonna have less
Mm,
capacity. Have you gotten to that place yourself where you're like, I'm okay with
mm.
welcoming in less or taking a slower approach?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, I have really tried to, well, honor that for one, that it's going to be a slower approach, but finding the modalities of training that do work with my system has
Hmm.
been super helpful. Also, like if I know I'm going somewhere like a concert because I love live music or someplace where
Hmm.
I know there's going to be a lot of stimulation, it's just kind of preparing myself like, okay, it's going to take me a little while to kind of really feel fully present here.
Yeah.
But I do a lot of like people watching and it kind of gets me out of gets me more focused with my attention versus just like,
Hmm.
there's too much.
Just kind of letting yourself ease in a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of taking in the scene.
Yes, exactly. Well, and sometimes to me, the people watching gets me sort of in a more curious mindset, like, oh, what's
Hmm.
happening? Yeah, oh, what are they doing? What are they talking about? Or, yeah, what's the dynamic in that relationship?
I know it's so interesting to notice those little details and pick up on that. Like,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
love that. Like, oh, then maybe you want to lean in more versus
right,
run away.
right, exactly,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. It sort of just opens up that sort of more curious mindset and yeah, makes it
Mm-hmm.
easier.
And so bringing in space for that. Arrive early. Don't put
Hmm.
that pressure on yourself just to dive in, even if the other people you're with are doing that or other people you see are doing that. Just like pump the
Yes.
brakes a little bit.
Yep, exactly. Yep, and getting there early, finding my seat, if it's especially like a
Hmm.
concert or something or theater or things like that where there are a lot of people and jostling. But sometimes too, leaving early. Like if I've had enough, it's like, okay, that's okay.
Hmm. Yeah, that's okay too. Like when and how do you know when it's time to leave early? Does your
Hmm.
system tell you?
Yeah, I tend to get a little cranky, I get a
Uh-huh.
little irritable. Yeah, I think I just get tired too,
Yeah.
which adds to the irritability. But yeah, I just
Hmm.
get tired. It's like, okay, it's time.
It's time to go.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And what I hear you saying is that we don't have to miss out. It's just maybe making some modifications around how we arrive and how long we stay or how we treat ourselves during.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. Well, and I feel like for trainings too, like another side of that is like if if it's possible, if I can be off camera, that's helpful.
Hmm.
Sometimes I end up like laying on the floor in my office, so I just listening versus having to necessarily watch all the PowerPoints and, try to take in all the information at the same time. It's like sort
Hmm.
of limiting how much I'm bringing in, so that can be really helpful too.
Yeah, looking at maybe the overall picture of the sensory load. So
Mhm.
if we're listening, maybe we could shut down our visual simulation.
Right.
Because looking at all those faces on Zoom is a lot.
Mhm.
Or looking at slides over and over and over also gets to be a little overwhelming. So if we can
Yeah,
just,
especially if they're like packed with information.
yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
yes, exactly. Yeah, a lot
Or
of
they're
times these,
going through them quickly. Yeah.
right. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
The pace, the content, or the way the content's presented usually isn't designed for HSPs. You're right.
Right.
Like people want to pack in a lot of information, which I guess I appreciate at one level, but it can be difficult on the other level to actually assimilate it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. Getting creative how you take care of yourself.
Yep, it's taken a while, but I'm learning. Yeah.
Yes, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there's those little things that we can do day to day, but what if we're trapped in maybe a longer period of overwhelm? It's not just particular events, but maybe we're stuck in a stress cycle. Um,
Mm,
what can we do then?
mm. For me, I think what's helped is having, I guess over the last, 10 or 12 years, really making my mindfulness meditation practice a regular part of my day. So even if I recognize when the stress is building faster.
Hmm.
Um, if it gets to the point where I kind of wasn't paying attention and I'm all of a sudden like, I know enough to be like, oh, all right, well, I need to do something. And sometimes I can remove myself in a way that's not rude or or if, um, too disruptive. I can be like, I need to go to the bathroom, and I can
Yeah.
go to the bathroom and just kind of recenter, get some quiet. I know 2 weekends ago, my youngest son, he's 28, and he brought home, we have a smallish house,
Hmm.
but he brought home 5 of his closest friends, all of whom were very boisterous and loud and sweet and kind, but just a lot of energy with all of them in
Yeah.
the house. And there were times where I would just kind of disappear into my room and just, find some quiet, whether it was like, I don't know, like folding towels or just doing something very mundane that just really helped me just kind of recenter myself.
Yeah, something to anchor.
Hmm.
Yes. It's so
Yeah.
important to be able to step out. Not that you have to, I mean, you could leave entirely, but even just having those breaks
Yeah.
in the kind of like more chaotic energy, the social
Yes.
frenzy, can make a big difference just to kind of come back to yourself. And folding
Mm.
towels is a great practice. It's very tactile, it's soothing.
Yeah, they all look neat and I like them to be very
Exactly.
neat and tidy, folded in the same way, so then it looks really nice when I put them away. Yeah.
Yes, I love it. Yeah, it's so important to just to think outside the box there, because I think a lot of times we as HSPs we want to show up just like everybody else,
Yeah.
and we'll often push ourselves beyond our limits to do that, and then we get irritable, or maybe we start to snap at people, or we can't, the emotions become uncontained,
Yeah.
and then that's
Yeah.
also not comfortable for us either.
Yeah.
Yeah, so being able
Yeah.
to slow it down. I'm
Hmm.
curious, is this something that you've always been able to do, or is this something you've leaned into more as you've discovered your sensitivity and being able to take care of yourself in these ways?
Definitely something that I've leaned into. I think in the past, I felt like I had to be like everybody else. Like I would
Mm.
push myself just almost to the point of exhaustion, right? Like just even raising kids. Like, so I was a stay-at-home mom, but I also took care of other people's kids and just sort of that, um, well, that was not designed for my nervous system. Lots of young
Sure.
kids in the house, love my kids and love their kids too, but it was a lot. But I didn't really know how to do it differently. And so by the end of the day, I would find that I was exhausted and frustrated and didn't look forward to the next day. And so as I've learned, how to build my own therapy practice and not completely overwhelm my system by pushing too hard or taking on too many clients. It really has been a learning process of like what works, what doesn't,
Mhm.
um, noticing the signals when the overwhelm is building. Um, I have gone through periods of, even in the therapy work, of, feeling burned out and just feeling
Mhm.
just my system just taxed. And so, I've learned too, like I have to take vacations. I have to get away from the business.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and that's definitely been a learning process.
Mhm. Yeah, we really do need those breaks just to
Yeah.
set just to set everything down.
Yes.
Ha-
Yes.
And you found ways to do that even as a parent and a
Mm-hmm.
therapist. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Well, my kids are all now grown and out of the house, but
Mhm.
even when they do come home, it is a different energy, and it's learning to appreciate them and their gifts too,
Mhm.
that I do have. I would say all three of my boys have some sensitive characteristics. One's a very outgoing sensitive. Well, I would say two are. The other one's a little more introverted. But yeah, yeah, yeah. Just appreciating them and their sensitivities and what they need, but also as we gather as a family to build in time of like, we don't have to just be doing, doing, doing. Like we can
Yeah.
relax
Right.
and hang out and yeah.
Yeah, just be together.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
what a beautiful modeling for them.
Yeah, well, definitely has taken some time to really own for me, but also to help them own their own sensitivities too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right, especially for boys, it can be harder at times. So being able
Hmm.
to, at least at home, where they can let themselves show up fully.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so important.
Yeah.
Love
It
that.
is. It really is.
And you
Yeah.
mentioned, it's part of your process is really just noticing.
Yeah.
Noticing when you're overwhelmed, notice when it's time to take a break, noticing what other people are bringing and appreciating that as well.
Hmm.
Um, and you alluded just briefly to your meditation practice. So is that a kind of integral part of being with your sensitivity? Just bringing that mindfulness lens?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. It's even, um, well, I think it's helped me better identify when the overwhelm is building or when I'm getting more stressed. So I can take care of myself like sort of incrementally versus when I'm like spent and beyond, just need to
Yeah.
crash. Um, but I do think too, with the mindful meditation practice, that a robust self compassion practice has been incredibly helpful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you
Yeah.
say more about that?
Yeah, well, I think probably around the time I was learning about high sensitivity, I was also really diving deep into Kristen Neff and Chris
Mm-hmm.
Germer's work around self-compassion. And in order to really embrace and hold my sensitivities as valuable and gifts, it really took finding that compassion for when it felt really hard or when
Mm-hmm.
I felt like maybe I had pushed myself too far or, overburdened my system, but also just to be compassionate for the sensitivity itself, right? Like this is who I am. This is how I'm built. Um, And that can be a gift, but it can also be a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
So compassion feeds into acceptance.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and it also helps me better understand when maybe there are less sensitive people that I'm with to be like, okay, well, I can be compassionate towards them too. They don't really get it. They don't get it from me. So maybe I have to just either explain it or just soften myself a little bit just so I can be in their presence. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So understanding that, I think that's really important to understand that we're not all wired the same and other people aren't having our lived experience.
Yeah.
So taking on that responsibility to express your needs and um, your point of view as a sensitive person.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's so important to do. I think we forget that because we are so good at noticing other people.
Yes, we are.
We are so good at it. And it's not, others aren't even always able to notice
Yeah.
us at that same, subtle level of detail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Mm-hmm. Love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I
So,
think
yeah.
it just helps too with if we are bumping up against people who we feel like are insensitive
Mm-hmm.
to be able to kind of find compassion for them. Like, all right, well, what are they going through that they're not able to receive me in the way I need to be received?
Right. Right. Because there may be something getting in the way for them,
Mm-hmm.
where they don't have the capacity.
Yeah.
I'm curious if let's say that lack of capacity shows up as maybe misunderstanding or moves into maybe critical comments or something that feels uncomfortable or unsafe. What do we do then? Because I think
Yeah.
then something else besides compassion might need to come in. Just curious about that piece. When it's
Yeah.
feeling like too
Well,
much.
we have to defend ourselves, right? I mean, we
Yeah.
can't just open our hearts and say, I'm gonna let my sensitive parts and be hurt or wounded.
Mm-hmm.
And that's definitely been a challenge for me. I am such a non-confrontational person
Mm-hmm.
that it's taken, I've had some challenging relationships where I've had to go back and say, hey, at the time, I didn't really understand what was happening for me, but, either it hurt my feelings or, um, I felt a certain way and I'd like to get some clarification, to just try to, well, I recognize it takes me a long time to process stuff. So it sometimes
Mm-hmm.
means I have to come back and then clarify or, uh,
Yeah.
reframe what happened or frame what happened even just to better understand it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Right. I think this is something a lot of us go through where since we are needing to kind of take things away and process them on our own, we need to give ourselves that space to come back, revisit a conversation with someone once we've
Yeah.
had time to understand what it means for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because that
Yeah.
confrontation is really uncomfortable and it's not always available even in the moment.
No, it's true, especially if it isn't feeling safe or, but also too, like I think there was a part of me for a long time that it would make it so I was constantly sort of rehashing what I could have said, like, "Oh, if I'd only thought," and of course, this is how I felt because of X, Y, and Z, and it has taken me some time to then actually come back and
Yeah.
address those things in a way that feels safe for me too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What does safety in those conversations look like for you? What do you need?
Hmm. I need somebody to listen, there's that, to
Yeah.
receive what I'm bringing.
Mm-hmm.
Um I guess some compassion on their end too for me,
Mm-hmm.
to really be able to hear me without either minimizing or diminishing what I'm saying. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Some reciprocity.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
love that word. Yeah.
Yeah, so important.
Yeah.
And yeah, I really appreciate that. It's just giving ourselves time to process, to take care of ourselves, and then making sure that we're getting something back. Other people are not going to always understand our sensitivity.
Yeah.
They're not always, they're not having the same lived experience, but at least they could, you know, offer some understanding or interest,
Yeah.
curiosity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just be willing to listen, even if they say, I don't really get it, but I hear
Right.
you. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I know in your work you talk a lot about compassion and finding balance. I'm curious, what does balance look like for you as an HSP, or how do you help your clients find balance? I'm just curious if we could dive into that a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah. I think a lot of times my clients, as you said, are so good at, and me too for a long time, just so good at picking up on what other people need
Mm-hmm.
and sort of reading the emotion and really trying to offer up as much support and care and meeting other people's needs. And for a long time, um, for my clients a long time of overdoing that without taking care of their own needs. So learning to pause or take a break or um, meditate, right? To
Mm-hmm.
really learn what you do need. Like, because I
Yeah.
think if we're constantly giving, 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 sometimes we lose track of where our needs have been, like where they
Mm-hmm.
fall and all of that. And it can be hard in relationships where that's been the pattern, where you've been the giver and really it has not been reciprocal, right? There hasn't been a lot of giving back. So that can be a challenge for some of my clients to find that in a way that really works for them and the people in their lives, their relationships. And sometimes it means they're letting go of some of the relationships and that
Mm-hmm.
to in order to feel balanced and safe in their own communities. Um, for myself, I've learned that I really need to turn off work sometimes, which
Mm-hmm.
building a business was really hard. I felt like I was glued to my laptop for like the first 3 years of my business, just like, how do I build it? I need clients. Fortunately, that has eased, so I don't have to be quite so attentive to it, but it still takes marketing and
Mm-hmm.
persistence and putting myself out there sometimes if I don't necessarily feel like it. So finding that balance of like the moments where like I'm better at like writing copy or writing my newsletter or blog early in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
So if I can do that before there's a lot of distraction or before I get too tired, it flows pretty easily. Um, Making sure I have actual days off. Like now I take off on the weekends. I don't work on the weekends at all. I mean, well, I try not to. But,
Mm-hmm.
if it's something small like behind the scenes stuff, I will do it. But yeah, I need time away from work,
Mm-hmm.
but I also need fun time. Like I need time in
Yeah.
nature. I need to walk. I need to spend time with my dog who is sleeping quietly next to me right now and spend time with my husband and my kids. And that's really, really important too. So, and I love to travel. So it's like being able to uh, be an entrepreneur, but not have it take over my life is really the most important thing that like
Mm-hmm.
the personal stuff is just as important. maybe
It
maybe more
is.
important.
It's true. And it does get hard to find space for it because when you own your own business or businesses, you could always be working in them or on them.
Always.
The door doesn't always completely shut.
It doesn't.
So it's very tempting to hop on the computer on the weekend. Oh, just get ahead for the next week, or oh, I want to finish this project. It's something
Yeah.
I struggle with too, just finding that balance. And you're right, we need to have space for all those different pillars of our lives. Time in
Hmm.
nature, time with our relationships, with our animals,
Yeah.
with our spiritual practice,
Yes.
meditation, compassion
Yes.
practice, so important.
It
It's
is. It
to fuel
really is.
ourselves. So I hear you saying is like getting to know yourself, building a relationship with yourself is really important to find that balance. So you know what you need and when you need it, and then be able to see when you've hit that limit early on in the process,
Yes.
not once you're in a state of burnout or you're feeling maybe you've gotten
Yes.
sick or you're highly anxious, whatever the sign is for you. Just
Hmm.
slowing it down a bit.
Yeah.
Coming into
Yeah.
that before gets to be
Yeah.
too much.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that is something I advocate for all my clients because so often, if they are giving, giving, giving and pushing themselves in their work and their home life, and like it gets to the point where it's not sustainable. And so, but sometimes those patterns are so set that it's hard to like just slow it down and you know, I can remember for a long time, I was just telling people 3 times a day, check in with yourself,
Yeah.
breakfast, lunch, and dinner. How am I
Mm.
doing? And
That's
just make it a practice of like, oh, let's reflect back. Where am I? Where's my stress? Yeah, how am I feeling? Do I need to recharge?
mm-hmm. By just starting to ask the question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Just making that part of like, maybe it's time to check in with me.
Yeah, right, right. We're so good at checking with everyone else, but we
Yeah.
forget about ourselves.
We do. We really do.
So that's a great place for folks to start. Just saying, how am I doing? What do I need?
Yeah.
And if that's kind of a new process for someone, maybe they've never done any mindfulness work or haven't really, you know, spent a lot of time on themselves, how
Hmm.
can we make sure that we lean into that practice if it feels unknown to us? Like, how do we make sure we show up and ask the question? Is it setting an alarm on our phones? Is it coupling it with something, some other task like brushing your teeth? What do you
I think
find that
both those
works?
things. I'm not a huge, like, I don't ever want someone to like feel like they're failing at checking in with themselves.
Right.
So it needs to work for them. So maybe like, like if it's mealtime or if it's when you go to the bathroom, but it's like sort of natural breaks in your day to just take a minute, reflect. I'm a big believer in like a little sticky note, like on your
Yes.
computer. Don't forget to check in with yourself. Yeah, things like that that just make it a soft practice, and if you forget, okay, well, I'm gonna make sure I ask at this next break,
Yeah.
just gonna come back to it.
Yeah, I love that. A soft practice.
Yeah.
It's not homework.
No, right. Exactly.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong if you forget.
Right, you're not failing, it's gonna take some, and it is a practice, that's why they call it that, right? It's just it takes time to sort of
Hmm.
it become more natural. I think at least not easy for everybody, but one way that's been helpful for me is to kinda tune in to my body and to, like, notice, like, do I have a whole lot of, tension in my chest, or is my belly feeling really disrupted, my digestive system, or am I holding tension in my shoulders? And even just like, am I breathing? Right? If I'm
Hmm.
like feeling super tense, we often hold our breath. So yeah, yeah, yeah. So just noticing those small things kind of opens doorways into what you do need.
Yeah, because our body is so great at telling us. Just a
Yes,
matter of can we listen?
exactly.
Like I have also my tells. Like if I've been socializing too long or I haven't, taken some downtime recently, like yes, my stomach will start to feel a certain way, or I will notice I'm not breathing deeply. Like, oh,
Yeah,
take a moment,
yeah.
slow it down, it's okay. Um, and it is a practice, isn't it? It's not, it ebbs and flows. It's this
Hmm.
organic
Hmm.
process and always changing. It's just showing up however you can. It's such
Yeah.
a gentle, affirming reminder.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's so important. Yeah.
And that's self-compassion in practice.
Yes,
Yeah, in
exactly.
action. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yes,
I love it.
exactly.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So I'm wondering if there was a message you could leave for HSPs who are starting to look at caring for themselves. Maybe it's a bit of a struggle. It's a
Hmm.
new process. What would that message be?
I think from what I want to get across, I guess, is that it's we do live in a somewhat fast-paced, semi-insensitive world right now, and that their gifts as sensitive people are needed. Just I think our energy is needed in the world. And so just offering, just, take your time with this knowing, take your time with understanding what you need, and yeah, bring some self-compassion into this process, because so often what we heard was we were too much, too emotional, too sensitive, to sort of reframe that like, yeah, I have lots of big emotions and I do feel things very deeply. And that's a good thing because we need that.
Hmm. We really do need that. And emotions are so valuable.
Yes, they are. They are.
Yes, in lots of different ways. So I love that reminder just to take your time, slow things down. And you said earlier, which I'm paraphrasing, but following your own rhythms.
Yep, absolutely.
Hmm.
Yep.
And being gentle with yourself, and so much becomes available when you do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it just creates a different way of being in the world that really supports you, which is amazing.
Hmm.
Which is really
Absolutely.
important.
And a sense of people, so much is possible when we support ourselves, not just for us, but for all the people in our lives.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I believe that firmly. Like if we
Hmm.
can enter in relationships in a more centered, grounded, peaceful, presence and acceptance of ourselves, like that radiates out into the world, which is beautiful.
It's so beautiful. Thank you, Biz. I really appreciate these gentle reminders to take care of ourselves and let that be a process. Don't have to get it
Mhm.
perfectly.
Yes, exactly. Yep,
Yes, thank
yep,
you for
yep.
that. I will be
Sure.
sure to share your website, your social media. You have a free guide to navigating friendships, which I love. I'll share all that in the show notes. You
Thank
also
you.
have another resource coming up, your sacred support circles for sensitive women.
I do.
And I'm wondering if you could share a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So, I guess about a year ago, so I had done group work off and on throughout both my training as a therapist, but also in different work environments. And I got away from it during the pandemic because it just felt like too much, but I really was feeling called back to it. And so just this focus on my own sensitivities made it a natural sort of product of how I would like to support other women. So yeah, so we gather, and a lot of it is really just about connecting with other sensitive souls because we don't get a lot of that energy. Like, so, it is a gentle flow. There is learning, but that's done sort of on the off weeks. And so you can do it or not do it. Like that's up to you. But it's really about building a really great relationship with yourself so that you
Mm.
can be that, most authentic, grounded, authentic person that you can be.
Yeah, that's it. And what we talked about today, just the importance of that, of just knowing yourself as an
Mhm.
HSP.
Yeah.
Yeah. And does it meet online?
It is. It's an online group for
Right.
anybody. So, as a therapist, I'm only licensed in Maryland and Delaware, but this is not a therapy group. So
Mhm.
anybody can join. It starts in October and it meets every other week. And there's payment options. But yes, it'll be
Beautiful.
an every other week group that meets on Thursdays, like 12:30 to 1:30 Eastern time.
Perfect. Wonderful. So yeah, I'll be sure to share that and I hope folks will check it out. It's a
Me
beautiful
too.
resource. We really do need community as HSPs to know there are others like us.
Yes, exactly. And just
Hmm.
to be within that energy of other sensitives, it's so beautiful.
It is so beautiful. Every time I'm in any type of HSP group, I always just feel so emotional and but in a positive way, just filled with gratitude.
Yes,
This
yes.
there's something different about it, which I'm sure you've seen. We just kind of get into the same, I don't know, we're just
Mhm.
at the same kind of energy level. Things are a little bit softer, a little bit slower. And it can
Yes.
be, for me, it's been really healing to be in that kind of space.
Yeah. Well,
Really
I
life
know I've
keeping.
shared this with you, but I so appreciate your group online for
Oh,
therapists.
thank
It
you.
really has been, I was kind of late to join it. Somebody was like, how come you're part of that group? I was like, I don't know. Why am I not? But it's been really beautiful just to be there with other therapists who are also highly sensitive.
Yeah, thank you. It's a special space for sure.
It
And
is.
but it's kind of a quiet group. We're just
It is.
it's like a word of mouth.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and it just feels like well, what I love about the sort of gathering with other highly sensitive people is that it really is like that softer energy.
Hmm.
It's really not to say we can't get loud and rambunctious too, but yeah, it just feels safe.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
Hmm.
I definitely feel that way too. Hmm.
Yeah,
Oh, well,
nice.
thank you so much.
Ah, thank you. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Of course.